What is happening to me?
Did you miss me, Spidey?
Really out of control.
This stuff, run. You can't control. What? Go!
People who love you, just gonna let him go on. Never forget that.
What if Spider-Man's next chapter completely changes everything we thought we knew about the MCU? Spider-Man, Brand New Day is bringing Peter Parker back for a new mission, new dangers, and potentially some shocking surprises. But what is this movie really about, and what hidden details should every Spider-Man fan know? In this video, ReelSignal Studio breaks down the story, facts, biggest theories, and everything you need to know about Spider-Man, Brand New Day. Stay until the end because one detail could change Peter Parker's future forever. Spider-Man, Brand New Day is a 2026 American superhero movie based on the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man. The movie is produced by Columbia Pictures, Marvel Studios, and Pascal Pictures, and it is distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. It is the 38th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, and the fourth Spider-Man movie in the MCU, following Spider-Man, No Way Home, 2021. The movie is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton and written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. It stars Tom Holland as Peter Parker, also known as Spider-Man. The cast also includes Zendaya, Sadie Sink, Jacob Batalon, John Bernthal, Florence Pugh, Tremaine Tillman, Marissa Tomei, and Mark Ruffalo. In this movie, Peter Parker is mostly on his own. He has become fully focused on protecting New York City as Spider-Man. After the events of his previous adventures, Peter is living a different kind of life. He has to deal with his personal problems while also carrying the responsibility of being a superhero. Peter is also working harder than ever to protect the city. His constant fighting, stress, and personal struggles begin to affect him in unexpected ways. His Spider-Man powers start to change and become stronger. At the same time, he faces a dangerous new threat that has telepathic abilities, making the enemy very different from the villains he has fought before. Sony began working on a fourth MCU Spider-Man movie by August 2019. In November 2021, producer Amy Pascal said that the movie was planned to be the beginning of a new Spider-Man trilogy starring Tom Holland. Work on the story started in December of that year. Holland was more involved in the development of the movie than he had been with the earlier Spider-Man films. Chris McKenna and Eric Summers returned as writers by February 2023. In October 2024, Destin Daniel Cretton was hired to direct the movie. The title Spider-Man, Brand New Day was officially announced in March 2025. The title comes from the 2008 Marvel Comics storyline called Brand New Day, which changed Spider-Man's life and his situation in a major way. The filmmakers wanted Tom Holland's Peter Parker to become a more independent and traditional version of Spider-Man. Instead of depending heavily on other superheroes, Peter is now expected to stand on his own. The movie focuses more on Spider-Man fighting crime at street level and dealing with problems that are closer to ordinary people. Destin Daniel Cretton also worked on rewriting the script with Justin Kurtzis. Before filming began, it was confirmed that John Bernthal would return as Frank Castle, also known as the Punisher. Mark Ruffalo would also return as Bruce Banner, the character who becomes the Hulk. Their appearances added even more connections to the wider Marvel Cinematic Universe. Filming for Spider-Man, Brand New Day took place from August to December 2025. Some of the movie was filmed in Glasgow, Scotland, while other scenes were filmed in different parts of England. The production also used soundstages at Pinewood Studios in England. Spider-Man, Brand New Day had its premiere at the Dolby Theatre in Hollywood, Los Angeles, on July 27, 2026. The movie was released in theaters in the United States on July 31, 2026. It became part of Phase 6 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The movie received mostly positive reactions from critics. Many critics praised Tom Holland's performance and the movie's action scenes. The more mature and emotional story also received attention. Compared with the earlier MCU Spider-Man movies, Brand New Day puts more focus on Peter Parker as a person and on the challenges he faces in his life. The movie also became a huge success at the box office. It has earned around $2.04 billion worldwide and has broken several box office records. It became the highest-grossing Spider-Man movie, the highest-grossing movie of 2026, and the 8th highest-grossing movie of all time. Overall, Spider-Man: Brand New Day presents a new chapter for Peter Parker. Instead of simply continuing the story from the previous movies, it shows Peter becoming a more independent Spider-Man. He has to protect New York City, deal with his personal struggles, understand his changing powers, and face a completely new kind of enemy. The movie combines superhero action with a more personal story about Peter's growth, responsibility, and life as Spider-Man. Tom Holland as Peter Parker. Spider-Man. Tom Holland returns for his 4th solo outing as Peter Parker, the young man whose life was upended by a radioactive spider bite and subsequent years of extraordinary responsibility. In Spider-Man: Brand New Day, the character exists in a markedly different status quo from the one established across Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. Following Doctor Strange's reality-altering spell, the world has forgotten that Peter Parker ever existed. Friends, allies, and the broader public no longer connect the awkward, brilliant young man with the celebrated street-level protector swinging across New York City. Holland's performance centers on the psychological and physical toll of that isolation. Peter has dedicated himself entirely to the Spider-Man identity, treating the mask as both shield and purpose. Director Destin Daniel Cretton has described this version of Parker as someone dedicating his entire existence to the role, a selfless commitment that begins to extract a personal cost. Holland has spoken about the film's focus on the transition from adolescence into adulthood, drawing parallels to his own maturation during the years between No Way Home and this installment. The character's powers themselves evolve in visible and visceral ways. Organic webbing emerges from his wrists, eliminating reliance on mechanical web shooters. Heightened senses intensify at moments of extreme stress or loss of control. His eyes darken completely. These changes are not presented as pure upgrades. They function as manifestations of unchecked pressure and emotional strain. Holland's physical performance incorporates the new abilities with a mixture of exhilaration and unease, particularly in sequences where Peter's control slips and the violence becomes more brutal than the character has previously allowed. The actor's long tenure in the role informs every beat. Holland originated the MCU Spider-Man in Captain America: Civil War and carried 3 solo films that blended high school comedy with escalating stakes. Here the comedy remains, but it is tempered by loneliness. Interactions with returning and new characters frequently place Holland's Parker on the back foot, whether navigating the awkwardness of encountering people who once knew him intimately or attempting to partner with more hardened vigilantes. The performance emphasizes quiet observation, Peter watching MJ and Ed from a distance, visiting Aunt May's grave, or processing the consequences of his evolving abilities in isolation. Holland's established rapport with the material allows the film to treat the character's internal conflict as the central engine rather than relying solely on spectacle. Zendaya as Michelle M.J. Jones-Watson. Zendaya reprises her role as Michelle M.J. Jones-Watson, the sharp, dry-witted former classmate who became Peter's romantic partner across the previous trilogy. In the aftermath of the spell, MJ has no memory of Peter Parker. She has graduated from MIT alongside Ned Leeds, shares an apartment with him in New York, and has begun a new relationship. Zendaya's portrayal captures a young woman who has continued to grow independently. The quirks that defined earlier appearance as her deadpan delivery, interest in the unusual, and quiet intensity remain intact, but they are filtered through greater maturity. Zendaya collaborated with the writers to preserve that specificity after early drafts risked flattening the character into something more conventional. The emotional core of MJ's arc involves the dissonance of being remembered by someone she cannot recall. Peter's attempts to protect her without revealing his identity create tension that Zendaya plays with restraint. When the telepathic threat endangers her, the performance shifts into urgency without abandoning the character's fundamental composure. Later moments, including the discovery of an unsent letter and a tentative invitation for masked Spider-Man to join her and Ned, allows Zendaya to explore residual connection without forced nostalgia. The presence of a new boyfriend, portrayed by him and his Fandy, adds another layer of complication that the actress navigates with understated complexity rather than melodrama. Zendaya's real-life relationship with Holland has long been public knowledge, yet the on-screen dynamic in Brand New Day deliberately avoids easy resolution. The chemistry that defined earlier films is present in residual form as shared glances. Instinctive concern about it is subordinated to the larger theme of irreversible change. Her performance anchors the film's exploration of what remains when shared history is erased. Sadie Sink as Jean Grey. Sadie Sink's casting as Jean Grey represents one of the film's most significant introductions and a major step in the MCU's integration of mutants. Sink, widely recognized for her work as Max Mayfield on Stranger Things, brings a raw, youthful intensity to a character traditionally portrayed as an adult telepath and eventual X-Men cornerstone. In Brand New Day, Jean is a teenager still discovering the full extent of her abilities. She possesses telepathy, telekinesis, and the capacity for possession, jumping her consciousness into other bodies within limited range and controlling their actions. Early in the film she remains largely off-screen, operating through proxies as she searches Department of Damage Control facilities for information related to her missing sister, Sarah. Sink's performance emphasizes isolation, anger, and desperation rather than polished heroism or outright villainy. Jean does not view herself as an antagonist. She believes her actions are justified by the need to locate her sister. The actress and Cretin focused on portraying a hurt teenager whose loneliness mirrors Peter's own. When her identity is finally revealed, Sink conveys both vulnerability and formidable power. Sequences in which Jean is captured and later expands her abilities after learning of Sarah's fate showcase a progression from controlled, purposeful action to overwhelming psychic force. The character's green and yellow color palette appears in her street clothing rather than a full superhero costume, a deliberate choice that keeps her grounded as a young woman rather than an established costumed figure. Sink prepared by reviewing previous screen versions of Jean Grey while deliberately differentiating this iteration. The absence of Professor Xavier and the X-Men in her backstory leaves her without guidance or community, heightening the sense of a powerful individual operating alone. Her interactions with Peter evolve from adversarial to something closer to mutual recognition of loss. Sink's ability to convey internal conflict through limited dialogue and physical presence makes Jean a compelling counterpart to Holland's Spider-Man and positions the character for future development within the larger MCU mutant narrative. Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds. Jacob Batalon returns as Ned Leeds, Peter's former best friend and one-time gay in the chair. Like MJ, Ned has no memory of Peter Parker. He has graduated from MIT, cohabits with MJ, and has channeled residual curiosity about Spider-Man into an app called Spidey Tracker, an attempt to identify and thank the hero who once saved him and his classmates. Batalon's performance retains the warmth and slight awkwardness that defined the character across the earlier films while reflecting greater independence. Ned and MJ have built functional adult lives, yet both carry a subtle sense that something is missing. Batalon's scenes with Holland are charged with the peculiar tension of one-sided recognition. Peter observes Ned from a distance, and later interactions, particularly the reintroduction of their old handshake near the films, and to carry emotional weight without overstatement. Batalon effectively communicates Ned's good-natured persistence and underlying loneliness. The character's technological bent remains a useful plot element, but the performance prioritizes relational dynamics over gadgetry. Batalon's long association with the role allows him to convey continuity even as the circumstances around Ned have fundamentally changed. John Bernthal as Frank Castle. The Punisher. John Bernthal's Frank Castle provides one of the film's most forceful supporting turns. The Punisher enters the story as a lethal, solitary force whose methods stand in stark contrast to Spider-Man's non-lethal approach. Castle's psychological state, further explored in the preceding Disney Plus special The Punisher, One Last Kill, finds him largely sworn off ordinary human connection. He operates from a converted industrial barge houseboat named Golden Girl and employs a comic-accurate battle van. Bernthal's physicality and intensity dominate shared scenes, creating a big brother, little brother rivalry dynamic with Holland that the actors developed through improvisation. Castle functions as both temporary ally and cautionary figure. His willingness to accept collateral damage and his comfort with lethal force force Peter to confront the darker path that isolation and grief can create. Bernthal's performance avoids caricature. The character remains driven by a rigid internal code even as that code places him at odds with Spider-Man's principles. Military advisor Colton Hill assisted Bernthal on set, contributing to the authenticity of Castle's tactical bearing. The role expands the street-level texture of the film while giving Bernthal substantial screen time to embody a version of the Punisher fully integrated into the MCU's current phase. Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. Hulk. Mark Ruffalo reprises his long-running role as Bruce Banner, the brilliant scientist who transforms into the Hulk under emotional stress. In Brand New Day, Banner has settled into a quieter existence as a professor of quantum mechanics at Empire State University. He relies on an inhibitor device, a technology previously glimpsed in Shanghai and the Legend of the Ten Rings and expanded upon in She-Hulk. Attorney Atlawa to suppress the gamma radiation that triggers transformation. Peter seeks Banner's expertise when his own powers begin to evolve unpredictably. Ruffalo's performance balances intellectual curiosity with residual wariness about the Hulk's destructive potential. The inhibitor's removal during a critical sequence unleashes the Savage Hulk, last prominently featured in Avengers: Infinity War. The resulting confrontation with Spider-Man is among the film's major action set pieces, allowing Ruffalo to shift between the measured scientist and rampaging alter ego. Banner's temporary loss of control underscores the film's themes of suppressed power and the danger of isolation. Ruffalo's established history with the character lends way to the mentor-like guidance he briefly offers Peter, even as circumstances spiral beyond either man's control. Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova. Black Widow. Florence Pugh appears as Yelena Belova in a pair of memorable sequences that bridge Brand New Day with the broader New Avengers continuity established in Thunderbolts. Yelena has effectively inherited the Black Widow mantle in public perception following Natasha Romanoff's death. She maintains an unconventional office in a New York bathhouse, where she receives Spider-Man for consultation. The primary scene requires Peter to join her in the water mask still in place as a security measure, generating both humor and character insight. Pugh's dry, teasing delivery places Holland's character firmly on the defensive, fulfilling the actress's earlier public comments about wanting Yelena to take the piss out of Spider-Man. Yelena provides critical information about Department of Damage Control and later assists in investigating the agency's activities. Her presence reinforces connective tissue between street-level and larger-scale MCU operations. Pugh's limited but high-impact screen time demonstrates the character's continued evolution from Red Room assassin to independent operator and team leader. The bathhouse sequence, retained across multiple script drafts, showcases the writer's and performer's commitment to distinctive, character-driven interaction over pure exposition. Tromail Tillman as William Bill Metzger. Tromail Tillman portrays Bill Metzger, director of the Department of Damage Control. Tillman, who earned an Emmy for his work on Severance, brings a calm, measured authority to the role. Metzger presents himself as a pragmatic official concerned with containing superpowered threats, yet the performance gradually reveals more complex and sinister motivations. Inspired in part by the steady demeanor of political figures, Tillman's Metzger maintains composure even as his true activity as experimentation on mutants come to light. The character's interactions with Spider-Man begin as cooperative and evolve into antagonism, requiring Tillman to modulate between public-facing professionalism and private truthlessness. Michael Mando as Mac Gargan. Scorpion. Michael Mando returns as Mac Gargan, the criminal first introduced in Spider-Man: Homecoming, who has fully embraced the Scorpion identity. Equipped with armored technology and a mechanized tail, Gargan serves as both a physical threat and a vessel for Jean Grey's early possession attacks. Mando's performance retains the coiled intensity that defined the character's previous appearance while expanding the physical menace through the enhanced suit. His presence links the current story to the franchise's earlier street-level conflicts. Liza Calley-Cubed and Zayas as Detective Jean DeWolf. Liza Calley-Cubed and Zayas plays Detective Jean DeWolf, a ninth officer who has developed a working relationship with Spider-Man based on mutual trust rather than knowledge of Peter Parker's identity, drawn from the comics. The Wolf represents institutional legitimacy within the film's street-level framework. Call A tilde and Zayas, an Emmy winner for The Bear, brings grounded professionalism and quiet competence to the role. Her scenes with Holland emphasize practical collaboration and occasional friction over methods, reinforcing Spider-Man's integration into the city's protective infrastructure even as he remains personally isolated. Supporting and additional cast Marissa Tomei appears as May Parker within a shared memory sequence, providing emotional resonance tied to Peter's past. Marvin Jones III portrays Lonnie Lincoln, Tombstone, the albino crime boss previously voiced by the actor in Spider-Man: Into the Spider-Verse. Olivia Booth Ford plays Sorrow Gray, Jean's older sister whose fate drives much of the central conflict. Aminaz Fandi appears as MJ's new boyfriend, credited in subtitles as Paul. Sabrina Guevara reprises Sheila Rivera from Daredevil, Born Again. Naomi Watts provides the voice of Evie, Peter's eye assistant. Keith David narrates a nature documentary on spiders that Peter watches. Additional performers fill out roles ranging from hand ninjas to dog personnel and civilian New Yorkers, contributing to the dense urban texture of the film. The collective casting of Spider-Man: Brand New Day balances continuity with significant new introductions. Returning performers deepen established relationships under altered circumstances, while newcomers particularly Saints Jean Grey expand the MCU's scope. The ensemble's chemistry, individual physical and emotional commitments, and alignment with the film's themes of isolation, evolving power, and the search for connection form the foundation of the project's character-driven approach. Production, development and pre-production. The road to Spider-Man: Brand New Day began years before a single frame was shot, rooted in the uncertain aftermath of Spider-Man: No Way Home. As early as August 2019, while Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios were still working on No Way Home, Sony was already reported to be developing a fourth MCU Spider-Man film. That same month, tensions between the two studios became public when Sony announced it would move forward on No Way Home without Marvel Studios and its president, Kevin Feige. After negotiations to renew their production partnership broke down, the backlash from fans was swift and intense, prompting Sony and Disney to return to the negotiating table. By the end of September 2019, a new agreement had been struck, allowing Feige and Marvel Studios to co-produce No Way Home alongside veteran producer Amy Pascal. Even before No Way Home reached theaters, its star Tom Holland was already thinking about what might come next and whether he wanted to be part of it. In February 2021, Holland stated that No Way Home represented the completion of his original contractual commitment to Sony and Marvel, though he expressed hope that he might continue playing Peter Parker in some capacity down the road. Around the same period, his co-star Zendaya, who plays Michelle MJ Jones-Watson, said she genuinely did not know whether another MCU Spider-Man film would materialize. By October 2021, Holland had begun describing No Way Home as the conclusion of the trilogy that started with Homecoming, suggesting that any future Spider-Man films would need to represent a meaningful tonal departure from what came before. The uncertainty deepened in November 2021, when Holland admitted he was unsure whether he should keep playing the character at all. He worried publicly about the optics of an actor in his 30s continuing to don his Spider-Man suit, and even mentioned that he found the idea of a Miles Morales-focused live-action film appealing as an alternative direction for the franchise. Despite Holland's hesitation, producer Amy Pascal made clear that she hoped to continue collaborating with him, and confirmed that work on the first installment of a planned new trilogy was already getting underway. The Hollywood Reporter noted at the time that Sony had not yet formalized concrete plans for additional MCU Spider-Man films, though the studio remained eager to continue its partnership with Marvel. Holland, for his part, hinted that exciting conversations were happening behind the scenes and expressed optimism about the franchise's future, even without knowing precisely what form it would take. By December 2021, Holland struck a more resolved tone, saying he felt he had accomplished what he set out to do with the character and was prepared to move on if another film didn't come together, while acknowledging that leaving the role would still be bittersweet. Around this time, Pascal spoke about her hope that the Sony-Disney partnership would endure long-term, and Feige assured audiences that the volatile split that had nearly derailed No Way Home's production would not happen again. Feige confirmed that Holland's Peter Parker would indeed return in a future MCU film and revealed that early story discussions were already taking place among himself, Pascal, and both studios. These initial conversations were explicitly framed as a continuation of the seismic choice Parker makes at the close of No Way Home, asking Doctor Strange to cast a spell erasing the world's memory of his identity as Spider-Man. Momentum continued to build in early 2022. By April, when longtime Spider-Man franchise director Jon Watts departed from Marvel Studios' Fantastic Four film, Sony was reportedly still counting on him to return for the next Spider-Man installment. The following month, Sony chairman and CEO Tom Holland publicly stated his hope that the whole group behind the previous trilogy, including Watts, Holland, and Zendaya, would reunite for the fourth film. Story development moved forward through 2023. In February, Feige revealed that the creative team had assembled a story built around some genuinely big ideas, and that writers had begun putting pen to paper. That momentum was interrupted in May 2023 by the Writers Guild of America strike, which brought work on the script to a halt. Pascal indicated that development would pick back up once the strike concluded. Holland, meanwhile, said he had participated in early meetings discussing ideas and ambitions for the project before the strike froze progress. He was candid about his mixed feelings. While he appreciated the creative justification for a fourth film, he also worried about the reputation fourth installments tend to carry in franchise filmmaking, and confessed to feeling a pull toward stepping aside and letting another actor carry the torch after what he considered a home run first trilogy. The strike ended in late September 2023, and by November, Holland confirmed that discussions about the film had resumed in earnest. He remains somewhat guarded, noting that he viewed No Way Home as the ideal send-off for his version of the character and was therefore not eager to rush into another installment unless it could truly do the character justice. In his conversations with the studios, Holland made a point of relaying what he described as the general vibe of fan reactions and desires circulating online since No Way Home's release, believing it was essential for the creative team to understand what audiences actually wanted to see, since the films are ultimately made for them. Among his contributions was a pitch that would prove foundational to the film's eventual plot, the idea that Parker's powers should undergo puberty-like changes, evolving and mutating in ways that mirrored the character's transition into adulthood. This kernel of an idea, as Holland called it, resonated with the creative team and was developed further over the following months. Not every pitch made the cut. An idea to give Parker a pet dog was floated at some point but, according to Holland, fell apart quickly. Early in 2024, industry journalist Jeff Snyder reported that Marvel Studios was considering both Drew Goddard and Justin Lin as potential directors. He also reported that Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, the screenwriting duo behind all three prior Holland-led Spider-Man films, had returned to pen the script, and that both Holland and Zendaya were expected to reprise their roles. Snyder additionally reported that filming was slated to begin around September or October of that year, a schedule that would require delaying production on the third season of Euphoria to accommodate Zendaya's availability. However, by March 2024, Variety reported that the script remained a work in progress, with no director attached and no firm filming date established. That same month, Holland addressed the delays, explaining that the studios were giving the writers the necessary time and space to work through the script following the strike's disruption. He reaffirmed his enduring affection for the franchise, crediting it with launching his career, while also stressing his desire to ensure the next installment honored the legacy established by the first trilogy. Notably, Holland had far more creative input on this film than on any of its predecessors, having been brought into the process much earlier. Feige confirmed in July 2024 that the script draft was nearing completion and would be submitted soon. though he also acknowledged that Watts' busy schedule with other commitments might prevent him from returning to direct. Watts ultimately opted not to direct the film. With Watts out of the picture, the studios turned their attention to other candidates. By September 2024, Destin Daniel Cretton had emerged as the top choice and entered early talks to direct. Cretton was already a known quantity within the Marvel ecosystem, having directed Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, 2021, and signed an overall deal with Marvel Studios in December 2021 that included a planned Shang-Chi sequel and development of the Disney Plus series Wonder Man. Cretton had also briefly been attached to direct the crossover film that was originally titled Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, taking that job in July 2022 before stepping down in November 2023 due to scheduling conflicts. That project was later reworked and became Avengers: Doomsday. Sources indicated that the fourth Spider-Man film had become a higher priority for Marvel Studios than a potential Shang-Chi sequel. Also in September 2024, McKenna and Summers were officially confirmed as the writers. Holland and Zendaya were reported to be in talks to return, and filming was projected to start in early 2025. Snyder, meanwhile, reported a targeted 2026 release and raised questions about how substantial Zendaya's role would actually be, given her packed schedule filming both Euphoria's third season and Dune, Part 3, 2026. A significant scheduling wrinkle emerged in October 2024, when Holland was cast in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, 2026. Holland asked Sony to push the start of Brand New Day's filming back by 6 months so he could complete work on The Odyssey first, and the studio agreed, citing respect for both Holland and Nolan. In retrospect, Holland believed this delay was actually a blessing in disguise, as it gave Cretton the additional preparation time he felt he needed to properly ready the film, a time he would not have had under the original schedule. Around this period, Holland also spoke about reading an early draft of the script alongside Zendaya. While he found it exciting, he acknowledged it still needed further refinement. He described the challenge of fitting the story into the broader MCU continuity as a tall order, though one he felt confident the creative team could pull off. Holland confirmed that filming would now begin in mid-2025. Shortly after these comments, both Holland and Cretton were officially confirmed to have signed on, and the film received a release date of July 24, 2026. During this extended 6-month development window, Justin Kurtzks came aboard to rewrite the script alongside Cretton, having previously collaborated with Zendaya and Sony on the film Challengers, 2024. Snyder reported in November 2024 that filming would likely not begin until late 2025 or early 2026, raising the possibility that the release could slip to 2027, partly because Sony wanted to avoid releasing the film in the same year as the animated Spider-Man, Beyond the Spider-Verse, which was then expected to arrive in 2026. That film was later rescheduled to 2027, resolving the conflict. A month later, Snyder reported more specific filming dates of June through October 2025, sandwiched between Euphoria's third season and Dune, Part 3, and noted that Zendaya's role had reportedly been significantly reduced as a consequence of her packed schedule, which also included her commitment to The Odyssey. Snyder's December 2024 report additionally claimed that alien symbiotes would factor into the script, that a new group of classmates for Parker would be introduced, that Sacha Baron Cohen would reprise his role as Mephisto from the Disney Plus miniseries Ironheart, 2025, and that Charlie Cox would return as Matt Murdock, Daredevil, reprising a role he had played in No Way Home and elsewhere in the MCU. Cox later denied any involvement in October 2025, and journalist Brandon Davis reported in May 2026 that Cox was not expected to appear in the finished film. In February 2025, filming was officially confirmed to begin in mid-2025 in London, and the release date was pushed back 1 week to July 31, 2026, in order to create more distance from The Odyssey's earlier July release. At this stage, Variety still described Zendaya's involvement as uncertain, while Deadline Hollywood reported that she would indeed return, though her deal had not yet been finalized. The following month, Sadie Sink was cast in a substantial role, arriving on the heels of speculation that she might be portraying the X-Men character Jean Grey within the MCU. Sink had a prior working relationship with Cretton, having appeared in his 2017 film The Glass Castle. The secrecy surrounding her specific character fueled significant fan speculation, with Sink herself later joking that a new theory about her role seemed to surface every week. At the end of March 2025, Sony held a panel at CinemaCon where Holland and Cretton officially unveiled the film's title via a video message, Spider-Man, Brand New Day, a name drawn directly from the 2008 comic book storyline of the same name that famously reset Spider-Man's status quo. Holland explained that the title felt appropriate given the fresh start the character was embarking on following the conclusion of No Way Home, later elaborating that the word rebirth captured his feelings about the project, describing it less as the fourth entry in an existing franchise and more as the opening chapter of an entirely new one. Cretton echoed the sentiment, describing the film as the start of a new chapter for the character and promising a tonal shift from the preceding trilogy. Holland went further, characterizing the new film's tone as considerably more mature than earlier MCU Spider-Man entries, likening its emotional register to the experience of adolescence itself. Around the same CinemaCon appearance, both Zendaya and Jacob Batalon were confirmed to be returning, with Batalon reprising his role as Ned Leeds. Snyder reported that the film's story would run concurrently with the events of Avengers: Doomsday, and that he did not expect Holland's Spider-Man to make an appearance in that crossover film as a result. Liza Cubed and Zayas joined the cast in May 2025 in the role of a detective. Zendaya and Batalon's returns were formally confirmed in June 2025, though the scope of their respective roles remained unclear at the time. That same month, John Bernthal was revealed to be reprising his MCU role as Frank Castle, Punisher. Holland and Bernthal had a prior professional relationship dating back to the 2017 film Pilgrimage, and the two had reportedly supported each other through the casting processes for their respective MCU roles. Industry observer Boris Kitt of The Hollywood Reporter suggested that Bernthal's addition signaled a more grounded, street-level story for Brand New Day, while also raising questions about how the character's characteristically violent nature would be reconciled with the franchise's family-friendly, PG-13 sensibilities. Feige confirmed Bernthal's casting the following month and explained that the Punisher's portrayal in this film would carry a noticeably different tonality compared to his earlier, more violent MCU appearances, a necessary adjustment given the PG-13 rating. Holland acknowledged the inherent tension of incorporating an R-rated character like the Punisher into the Spider-Man franchise, but expressed confidence that the filmmakers had found creative workarounds to keep the character authentic to what fans expect from Frank Castle, including a running gag in which Spider-Man webs the Punisher's mouth shut whenever he attempts to curse. Bernthal emphasized that it mattered a great deal to him, Holland, and Cretton that the Punisher depicted in Brand New Day feel consistent with the version seen in the Disney Plus television special The Punisher: One Last Kill, 2026. Feige framed the ending of No Way Home as an implicit promise to audiences that they would finally see Holland portray a proper Spider-Man, a hero operating independently, tackling street-level crime in New York City rather than the world-ending stakes of prior Avengers-adjacent storylines. He described Parker's circumstances in the new film evocatively, painting a picture of a young man living in a modest, somewhat sad apartment, listening to a police scanner and using his abilities responsibly without any larger institutional support. This narrower, grounded focus is what led the creative team to introduce other street-level heroes that Holland's Spider-Man had never previously crossed paths with, chief among them the Punisher. Feige pointed out that the Punisher character actually originated in the pages of a Spider-Man comic, The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 number 129, published in February 1974. He revealed that Cretton had pinned 8 or 9 classic comic book covers to the art department wall as visual touchstones the production intended to recreate on screen, including that cover, the cover of Amazing Fantasy Volume 1 number 15. Spider-Man's very first comic appearance, which depicts him swinging alongside a civilian. The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 number 134, showing a battle with Tarantula. The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 number 221, depicting Spider-Man dodging Ramrod. The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 number 345, featuring an attack by Boomerang. And Spider-Man Adventures number 2, showing Spider-Man struck by Scorpion's mechanical tail. Holland reflected on the storytelling challenge posed by the memory-erasing spell from No Way Home, calling it a creatively rich but logistically complicated device, particularly regarding how it affects the memories of characters close to Parker, such as MJ and Ned. He explained that under the spell's specific rules, people still remember Spider-Man as a figure and recall their interactions with him. They simply no longer connect those memories to Peter Parker's identity, with one significant exception. One of the film's central thematic threads concerns the difficulty of balancing professional obligations with personal life, expressed through Parker's decision to bury the trauma of being forgotten by throwing himself entirely into his crime-fighting duties while neglecting his civilian existence. Holland noted that this pattern prevents Parker from recognizing that his humanity, not just his heroics, is what makes him worth loving as a character. He drew a parallel to modern digital age behavior, describing how easy it is for young people to retreat into scrolling on their phones in the evening, numbing their minds and losing sight of the importance of genuine human connection. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers maintained close coordination with the creative team behind the Disney Plus series Daredevil, Born Again, 2025 present, to ensure narrative consistency and meaningful crossover impact between the two properties, particularly involving shared characters like the Punisher and Sheila Rivera. Brad Winderbaum, head of Marvel Television, noted that while the tone of each project differs considerably, the productions remain committed to reinforcing that both exist within the same shared universe. Following persistent rumors, Mark Ruffalo's casting as Bruce Banner, Hulk, was confirmed alongside the start of principal photography in August 2025. Industry reporters Boris Kitt and Aaron Couch observed that Ruffalo's involvement seemed to solidify only as the script came together in the run-up to filming, and pointed out that each prior MCU Spider-Man film had featured a major established MCU co-star as part of the special Sony Marvel arrangement. Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in Homecoming, Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury in Far From Home, and Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange in No Way Home. They likened this recurring pattern to the classic Marvel team-up comic book series, in which Spider-Man regularly partners with other heroes, and suggested that Brand New Day was stacking the deck by featuring both Bernthal and Ruffalo, the latter having previously made a brief cameo in Shanghai and the Legend of the Ten Rings under Cretton's direction. Holland had long expressed enthusiasm for a potential Spider-Man and Hulk team-up, citing a comic book image of the pair together that he admired and envisioning a dynamic between them akin to older and younger brothers. Also in August 2025, Michael Mando was confirmed to be reprising his role as Mac Gargan, Scorpion from Homecoming, following up on a plot thread first teased in that film's mid-credits scene. On the design side, costume designer Sonja Milkovic-Hayes returned from her work on No Way Home and other MCU productions, while production designer Charles Wood also returned from prior Marvel projects. Holland was directly involved in developing the new Spider-Man suit featured in the film, focusing not just on aesthetics but on the in-universe storytelling justification for its design. He also researched which specific details fans most appreciated about the suits worn by Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in their respective Spider-Man portrayals, incorporating some of those elements into the new design, for instance, lowering the belt to visually elongate the torso and adjusting the boots to create the similar effect for the legs. Holland noted that the new suit was constructed using an entirely different method compared to his previous Spider-Man costumes, resulting in something considerably more comfortable and flexible to perform in. The design builds on the suit introduced at the very end of No Way Home, which the in-universe narrative explains Parker constructed himself after being directly inspired by his encounters with both Maguire and Garfield's versions of the character during that film's multiversal team-up. Holland enjoyed the idea that Parker views the earlier Spider-Man almost as older brothers, admiring specific details on their suits and incorporating them into his own now that he no longer has access to Tony Stark's resources or the broader Avengers infrastructure. Because Parker must now build his own equipment from scratch, the film introduces new homemade technology, including an artificial intelligence system called EV and a fabrication device that Cretin likened to a heavily souped-up 3D print. Coverage of the project's long development period frequently emphasized just how unusual its path to the screen had been compared to earlier entries in the franchise, where Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home had each moved from announcement to release on relatively compressed timelines. Brand New Day spent nearly 5 years in various stages of development, delayed first by the fallout from the 2019 Disney-Sony rights dispute, then by the 2023 writers' strike, and finally by scheduling conflicts tied to Holland's, Zendaya's, and Ruffalo's overlapping commitments to other high-profile projects. Trade reporters often framed this extended gestation period as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gave Holland an unprecedented level of creative input compared to his earlier Spider-Man films, and gave Cretin, Kurtz's, McKenna, and Summers additional time to refine the script's central ideas. On the other hand, it fueled years of fan speculation, rumor, and anxiety about whether the film would ever come together at all, or whether Holland might ultimately step away from the role before a fourth solo film could be made. That speculation was only heightened by the frequent shifts in reported plot details throughout the development process. Various individual reports floated the possibility of symbiotes, an appearance by Mephisto, the return of Charlie Cox's Daredevil, and other high-profile crossover elements that ultimately did not factor into the finished film in the form initially rumored, or in some cases did not appear at all. This pattern of speculation followed by clarification or denial became something of a recurring feature of the film's pre-release news cycle, with journalists such as Jeff Snyder serving as a frequent early source of rumored plot and casting details that the studios would later confirm, revise, or contradict as filming and marketing progressed. Commentators generally attributed this unusually porous information environment to the intense, sustained public interest in any new Spider-Man project, as well as to the years-long gap between the character's last theatrical appearance and Brand New Day's eventual release, which left ample space for fan theories and unconfirmed reports to circulate widely across entertainment media and social platforms. Filming principal photography officially began on August 3, 2025, in Glasgow, Scotland, shot under the working title Blue Oasis. Cinematographer Brett Pollock, a frequent collaborator of Cretin's on his earlier films, returned to shoot Brand New Day. Filming had originally been targeted for early 2025 but was pushed back 6 months to accommodate Holland's commitment to the Odyssey. Holland drew inspiration from Christopher Nolan's meticulous, well-prepared approach to filmmaking and sought to bring a similar discipline to the Brand New Day production, insisting that each day's shooting be carefully planned in advance with a clear creative vision, rather than figuring things out on the fly during filming. His growing confidence as a creative collaborator was evident when he felt comfortable enough to ask producers and Cretin to pause filming on a scene between himself and Zendaya that he believed needed further reworking before it could be shot properly. The Glasgow shoot was scheduled to run roughly 2 weeks, taking place across the city centre including the Merchant City, George Square, and drawing 8 districts to stand in for New York City locations, and to capture one of the film's major action set pieces. Holland expressed genuine excitement about returning to on-location shooting, contrasting it with the far more restricted, largely soundstage-bound production of No Way Home, which had been shaped by pandemic-era industry constraints. He was pleased that fans could witness and share in the experience of the production's earliest days. The Jackie Chan stunt team, returning from their work on Shanghai and the Legend of the Ten Rings, coordinated the film's fight choreography. Set photographs captured during the Glasgow shoot showed armored vehicles bearing a Red Demon insignia, which Total Films' Bradley Russell speculated might connect to the Inner Demons gang from the comics, associated with the villain Mr. Negative, fueling fan theories about a potential appearance by that character. Separately, a report from Glasgow World noted that a reference bust in the shape of a rhinoceros head had been spotted on set, drawing comparisons to the classic Spider-Man villain Rhino. Jon Bernthal had arranged to film his Brand New Day scenes back-to-back with his work on One Last Kill, which wrapped filming in August 2025. Additional filming for Brand New Day took place at Brookwood Cemetery in Surrey, England, on August 7, 2025. Around the same period, the Glasgow shoot was extended through August 18 to accommodate the filming of a promotional commercial. Tremaine Tillman joined the cast at the end of August. A longtime fan of superhero cinema, Tillman had been eager for an opportunity to appear in one and was reportedly thrilled by his casting in Brand New Day. Soundstage production moved to Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, England, for most of September 2025. At the start of that month, Mark Ruffalo indicated he was still awaiting further information about his role and had not yet seen a script. In early to mid-September, additional location filming took place at Battersea Park in London. On September 19, Holland suffered a mild concussion while performing a stunt on the Pinewood set. Filming at Pinewood was subsequently paused until September 29 to allow him time to recover, as the production determined it could not adequately shoot around his remaining scenes. This pause was not expected to affect the film's release date. Later that same month, Marvin Jones III was revealed to be portraying crime boss Lonnie Lincoln, Tombstone, a role that carried some symmetry for the actor, who had previously voiced a different version of the character in Sony's animated film Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, 2018. Filming then moved to Phantom House in Basingstoke, England, initially involving one of Holland's stunt doubles. Filming at Basingstoke continued into early October, with Holland himself joining the shoot there, along with Michael Mantle. Later in October, Holland, Sink, and Ruffalo were spotted filming at Senate House in London. In early November, production moved to Ravenscourt Park, also in London. Throughout the month of November, filming continued at Prison Dorchester in Dorchester, England. Among the production's more technically demanding sequences were scenes designed to directly recreate the classic comic book covers Cretton had pinned to his art department wall. These shots were filmed at an extraordinarily high frame rate of 420 frames per second, a technique Cretton described as nearly impossible for a performer to execute convincingly. Despite the difficulty, Holland reportedly nailed the intended pose for the Spider-Man Adventures #2 homage in just 2 or 3 takes, a feat Cretton felt showcased the extraordinary degree of physical control Holland has over his own body. Brand New Day also holds the distinction of being the first film to shoot sequences specifically designed for the screen's format. The format's manufacturer, CJ Fordplex, sent a crew to set to capture footage intended for the panoramic side screens unique to Screenx theaters. Cretton announced on December 19, 2025, that filming had officially wrapped, calling the experience of directing the film one of the defining roles of his career. Holland similarly described the shoot as the most creatively fulfilling filmmaking experience of his career to date, praising Cretton for crafting what he considered the best version of a Spider-Man movie yet made. In January 2026, Deadline Hollywood's Justin Kroll reported that Feige had spent much of the previous year almost entirely focused on the production of Avengers: Doomsday and its sequel, Avengers: Secret Wars, 2027, leaving Pascal to oversee a substantial portion of the day-to-day production work on Brand New Day. Frequent Spider-Man franchise producer Avi Arad and producer Rachel O'Connor served as additional producers alongside Feige and Pascal. Additional photography took place in London in April 2026, with Holland explaining that these supplementary scenes were intended to inject more humor into the film and to reframe a villain-related plotline in a fresh way. He was careful to note that the film already worked well before these changes, characterizing the additional footage as simply icing on the cake rather than a substantive overhaul. In June 2026, Tremaine Tillman and Liza Collet-Tildecube and Zayas were officially confirmed to be portraying Bill Metzger and Jean the Wolf, respectively, while Holland confirmed that the film would feature a mix of both new and returning villains, among them Boomerang, Tarantula, and Ramrod. Post-production, a distinctive touch appears in the film's opening Marvel Studios logo sequence, which incorporates archival footage from earlier MCU Spider-Man films. presented as memories that Parker no longer shares with characters like MJ and Ned. A direct visual nod to the consequences of the memory erasing spell from No Way Home. Editing duties were handled by Nat Sanders and Gina Sansom, both of whom had previously collaborated with Cretton A. Sanders on Shanghai and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Sansom on Wonder Man. Visual effects work was distributed across several major studios, including Sony Pictures Imageworks, Framestore, Industrial Light Magic, Rise FX, Cantina Creative, Soho VFX, and SDFX Studios. Jerome Chen served as the film's visual effects supervisor, with David Bosco serving as visual effects producer. Music composer Michael Giacchino, who scored each of the previous MCU Spider-Man films, was confirmed in December 2025 to be returning for Brand New Day, continuing his long musical association with Holland's iteration of the character. Cretton first publicly discussed the film in detail at Sony's CinemaCon panel in March 2025, where Holland appeared via video message to announce its title. Industry commentators noted the fitting nature of the Brand New Day title, drawing a direct parallel to the 2008 comic book storyline of the same name, which itself followed the controversial 2007 A08 One More Day storyline and served to reset major elements of Spider-Man's continuity. A narrative device that closely mirrors the reset facing the MCU's Peter Parker following the conclusion of No Way Home. Speculation also circulated regarding what impact the cataclysmic events of Avengers: Doomsday might have on Brand New Day's own storyline. Diego Peralta of comicbook.com raised the question of whether the film might directly adapt specific plot elements from the source comics, such as Parker striking a bargain with the demonic Mephisto to resurrect his late Aunt May, who dies in No Way Home, or whether the title was intended more loosely, simply gesturing toward Parker's fresh start in life. Screen Rant's Kevin Erdman observed that the One More Day and Brand New Day comic storylines had proven controversial among longtime readers, largely because they reversed years of established character growth and relationship development. He suggested the film could draw from similar narrative territory without repeating those same missteps. On August 1, 2025, a date informally recognized within fan culture as Spider-Man Day, Sony released a brief 9-second teaser showcasing the film's new Spider-Man costume. The design featured comics-accurate red and blue coloring, raised textured webbing, and the same faint hexagonal pattern woven into the fabric that had appeared on Holland's earlier suits. Polygon's Michael McWhirter compared the raised webbing detail to the suits worn by Tobey Maguire, describing the fabric as glittery and textured, a marked departure from the sleeker, high-tech aesthetic of Holland's previous costumes. Gizmodo's James Whitbrook noted that the new costume still retains some of the metallic blue sheen carried over from the suit introduced at the conclusion of No Way Home. The following day, Sony released a longer 20-second teaser offering a complete look at Holland in the finished costume. Gizmodo's Justin Carter identified the enlarged spider emblem on the chest as the most significant visual change beyond the raised webbing, and also pointed out the teaser's use of Giacchino's established MCU Spider-Man musical theme. Variety's Jordan Morrow felt the completed costume leaned closer to its comic book source material than any of Holland's prior suits, while The Hollywood Reporter's McKinley Franklin observed that it bore a strong resemblance to the costumes worn by both Maguire and Garfield in their respective film series. On August 10, Sony released a behind-the-scenes video recapping the first day of principal photography. Variety's Jack Dunn remarked that Sony and Marvel had been unusually generous with the volume of promotional material shared thus far in the marketing campaign. The first full trailer arrived on March 18, 2026. In an unconventional promotional move, Sony partnered with fans and content creators around the world to release short trailer clips the day before the official drop. Comicbook.com's Tom Bacon compared the strategy to the cast announcement live stream Marvel Studios had used to promote Avengers: Doomsday the previous year, noting that both approaches were designed to maximize audience engagement throughout a single day. He appreciated the inclusion of fans in the rollout but questioned the lack of a discernible pattern behind the individual clips, most of which offered atmospheric, vibes-driven glimpses without much narrative context. Writers at Men's Journal and Bleeding Cool both likened the staggered release strategy to a scavenger hunt, with Men's Journal's Rebecca Jacobs finding it more interactive than Marvel's earlier Doomsday livestream, while Bleeding Cool's Caitlin Booth offered a more critical take on the approach. Variety's Zach Sharf noted that the trailer's slow-motion, moody visual style felt closer in spirit to the work of director Zack Snyder than to any prior MCU Spider-Man film. Multiple commentators pointed out that the trailer footage included a direct homage to the cover of Amazing Fantasy No. 15. Showing Spider-Man swinging through the city alongside a civilian. Much discussion also centered on the trailer's reveal that Parker's powers were mutating in unusual ways, including the emergence of organic web shooters and temporarily blackened eyes. Some speculated this represented an adaptation of the Six-Arm saga from the classic Amazing Spider-Man comics, a storyline that had also inspired the Man-Spider arc from the 1990s Spider-Man, the animated series, while others guessed it might instead draw from the 2005 A06, the other comic book crossover event. According to Sony, citing market research firm Wave Matrix, the trailer became the most viewed film trailer in history, racking up 718.6 million views within its first 24 hours online. It reportedly surpassed the previous record holder, Marvel Studios' Deadpool Wolverine, 2024, which had accumulated 365 million views in a full day, in just 8 hours, and it also eclipsed the overall 24-hour trailer viewership record previously set by the video game Grand Theft Auto V, 2026. Wave Metrics further reported that within 4 days, the trailer had surpassed 1.1 billion total views, making it the first film trailer ever to cross that threshold. Rothman and Holland went on to present additional footage from the film during Sony's CinemaCon presentation in April 2026. A second trailer followed on June 17, 2026. The Rap's Casey Loving felt this second trailer offered a somewhat clearer picture of the film's tightly guarded plot. He specifically highlighted the return of Bruce Banner's uncontrollable Savage Hulk persona, last seen in Avengers: Infinity War, 2018, and noted an apparent voice-over narration from Marissa Tomei's May Parker woven throughout the footage. Commentators also puzzled over a mysterious hooded figure glimpsed in the trailer, widely believed to be connected to Sadie Sing's still secretive character. Wave Metrics reported that the second trailer accumulated 590.8 million views within a single week, making it the second most viewed trailer of all time. Later that month, Sony screened the film's first 18 minutes for attendees at the Sign Europe convention. On June 27, Sony partnered with a pizza chain Little Caesars to construct a physical replica of Parker's apartment as set in Brand New Day, installed as an immersive fan experience in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. The installation was filled with Easter eggs tied to the film, including the first public look at Marvin Jones 3's tombstone and confirmation of Liza Cubed and Zayaz's previously mysterious role, while also promoting a Spider-Man-themed Webberoni pizza from Little Caesars. A tongue-in-cheek Zillow listing was even created for the fictional apartment. Separately, the Spider-Man suit featured in Brand New Day, informally dubbed the Fresh Start suit by fans and press, was added as a free update to the 2023 video game Marvel's Spider-Man 2 on July 28, 2026, just days ahead of the film's theatrical release. Released theatrical Spider-Man, Brand New Day was released theatrically in the United States by Sony Pictures, releasing on July 31, 2026. The film was presented in the ScreenX format, marking the first time a movie was specifically shot for that format's panoramic sidescreen presentation under the Shot for ScreenX marketing program, and it also received a release in IMAX in select international markets. Early screenings were held on July 29 in the United States exclusively for Amazon Prime members. The film's release date had originally been set for July 24, 2026. But was pushed back a week so that it would open 2 full weeks after The Odyssey rather than just one. helping the film avoid competing directly for the majority of available IMAX screens, which The Odyssey held exclusively for a 4-week window. The July 31st date became available to Sony after Disney removed an unspecified Marvel Studios film from that same release slot in August 2024. Brand New Day was positioned as part of Phase 6 of the broader MCU release slate. The film generated the strongest first-day advance ticket pre-sales seen in the United States in 5 years, dating back to No Way Home's 2021 release, which itself had generated an estimated $78 million in pre-sales. Home media in April 2021, well before Brand New Day's production even began. Sony signed separate streaming distribution deals with Netflix and Disney covering the studio's 2022 to 2026 film slate, applicable following each film's theatrical run and home media release window. Under this arrangement, Netflix secured exclusive Pay-1 window streaming rights, typically an 18-month exclusive period for the relevant films, including future Spider-Man releases following No Way Home. Disney, meanwhile, secured Pay-2 window rights, which allow eligible films to stream on Disney Plus and Hulu and to air on Disney's linear television networks. In January 2026, Sony and Netflix announced an updated agreement expanding Netflix's Pay-1 window rights to a global scope, a significant increase from the previous deal's more limited territorial coverage of just the United States, Germany, and Southeast Asia. This expanded agreement is set to take effect later in 2026 as individual territory rights become available, with full global implementation expected by early 2029. Reception: box office. Spider-Man, Brand New Day opened to historic numbers at the North American box office. The film collected approximately $355 million to $360 million from around 4,487 theaters in North America during its opening weekend, figures that placed it as the second biggest domestic opening weekend of all time, trailing only Avengers: Endgame's $357 million debut in 2019. Unadjusted for inflation, some outlets reported that the film's final domestic tally for the weekend ultimately surpassed even Endgame's all-time record once final Monday numbers were confirmed, positioning Brand New Day as the biggest domestic opening in box office history. By comparison, no other film besides these two had ever crossed the $300 million mark in a single opening weekend. Internationally, the film added roughly $573 million during its opening frame, pushing its global debut total to approximately $927 million at the second biggest worldwide opening of all time, again trailing only Endgame, which opened to a staggering $1.2 billion globally in 2019. Reports noted that the film's opening weekend included a notably strong $121 million 5-day debut in China, a market where the previous film, No Way Home, had never received theatrical approval, underscoring the enduring international appeal of Holland's take on the character. Sony reportedly spent around $225 million to produce Brand New Day, a figure that does not include marketing expenditures. The film's exceptionally strong reception scores helped fuel its record-breaking run. It debuted with an A grade on CinemaScore exit polls, an 88% definite recommend score on PostTrack, a 98% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, at the highest audience score of any of the 9 live-action Spider-Man films released to date, and a certified fresh critical score of 90%, only slightly below No Way Home's 93%. Trade analysts suggested that this combination of factors, paired with a comparatively light release slate for the rest of the summer, made it likely that Brand New Day would become just the 8th film in history and the first non-Avengers Marvel Studios release to cross $2 billion at the worldwide box office. That prediction proved accurate. Brand New Day continued to dominate the box office in subsequent weeks, remaining the #1 film domestically for 3 consecutive weekends, including a third weekend haul of $70 million that allowed it to fend off new releases such as The End of Oak Street and Paw Patrol, the Dino Movie. In doing so, the film became Sony Pictures' highest-grossing release of all time. Roughly 3 weeks into its run, The film crossed the $2 billion mark globally, cementing its status as one of the biggest box office successes in the history of the Spider-Man franchise, a franchise that, dating back to Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man in 2002, had already amassed nearly $10 billion in worldwide grosses across all of its various cinematic incarnations prior to Brand New Day's release. Industry analysts pointed to a number of factors that contributed to the film's extraordinary opening and sustained box office momentum. Chief among them was the relatively uncrowded late July and August release calendar, which allowed Brand New Day to dominate multiplex screens with minimal direct competition from other major studio tentpoles during its crucial early weeks of release. The film's rollout also benefited from a wave of pent-up audience anticipation built over roughly 5 years since No Way Home, during which Holland had not appeared as Spider-Man in any theatrically released MCU film. Several trade outlets noted that this long gap, combined with the intense secrecy maintained around the plot and the record-breaking trailer viewership numbers reported by Wave Metrics, helped generate an unusually high level of pre-release excitement that translated directly into the ticket sales. Commentary also focused on what the film's performance meant for Sony and Marvel Studios' long-running Spider-Man partnership more broadly. By becoming the first non-Avengers Marvel Studios release to reach the $2 billion milestone, Brand New Day set an unusually high bar for other Phase 6 releases to clear, including the highly anticipated Avengers: Doomsday, which was slated to arrive later the same year. Producer Amy Pascal, who had originally set the modern Spider-Man film franchise in motion during her tenure as chair of Columbia Pictures, credited the film's success to audiences embracing its emotionally driven, character-first approach under Cretton's direction, emphasizing that the story never lost sight of the humanity underpinning Peter Parker as a character. Kevin Feige similarly described the opening as a genuinely phenomenal result, expressing gratitude to audiences for turning out to experience the film as it was intended to be seen, on the big screen. Comparisons to the franchise's broader box office history were common in coverage of the film's performance. While Brand New Day's opening weekend numbers placed it just behind Avengers: Endgame in the record books, some outlets noted that, unlike Endgame, which arrived as the culmination of more than a decade of interconnected storytelling across 20-plus films, Brand New Day achieved its historic opening as a comparatively standalone, street-level story with a far smaller ensemble cast and none of the multi-franchise crossover elements that had fueled Endgame's unprecedented debut. This distinction led some analysts to characterize Brand New Day's opening as an even more striking demonstration of the individual box office drawing power of both the Spider-Man character and Holland himself as a movie star, separate from the pull of a larger ensemble event film. Critical reception to Spider-Man: Brand New Day was broadly positive, though somewhat more divided than its box office dominance might suggest, with many reviewers describing it as an ambitious but occasionally uneven entry in the franchise. Early reactions gathered by Rotten Tomatoes ahead of the film's release were notably enthusiastic, with some critics going so far as to call it the most grounded and mature Spider-Man story yet told on screen. Punch-drunk critic Travis Hobson wrote that the film offered a different flavor of fan service than the maximalist approach of No Way Home, arguing that it honored the character's legacy in a more restrained and thoughtful way, and praised Tom Holland for finally getting substantive dramatic material to work with as he conveyed Peter's turmoil and isolation. The Cinematic Reel's David Gonzalez went even further, suggesting the film came closer to capturing the spirit of Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man trilogy than any other MCU Spider-Man film before it. And Comic Book Club's Alexander Zalben similarly argued that Cretton had crafted the most purely Spider-Man film since Raimi's Spider-Man 2, with another critic placing it in close conversation with that widely beloved 2004 sequel as among the best live-action Spider-Man films ever made. Several critics singled out the dynamic between Holland, Zendaya, and Batalon as a highlight, even as some noted the trio shared less screen time together than in previous installments. The Weekend Warriors' Edward Douglas felt the scenes between the three actors represented the film's strongest material, while praising Cretton for honoring their established bond and layering new nuance into their relationships despite the story's central conceit that much of their shared history has been erased. Roger Ebert's website offered a more mixed assessment, praising Holland's performance as more than capable of handling the film's heavier dramatic demands and highlighting his continued chemistry with Zendaya, while also crediting the film for allowing Zendaya to play a different register of character than the more tormented role she had recently taken on elsewhere. That review also praised Sadie Sink's performance, noting she brought echoes of her work on Stranger Things while still demonstrating clear growth as a performer, and described her still mysterious character as functioning as a thematic mirror for Peter, another exploration of how great power and trauma can lead toward tragedy. However, the review ultimately argued that producers and Cretton seemed hesitant to fully commit to the film's most interesting ideas, leaving several threads underdeveloped and giving the film an overall feeling of being more transitional than truly impactful within the larger franchise. Other reviewers were similarly enthusiastic about the film's action filmmaking. A review from Discussing Film praised Cretton's handling of the movie's swinging sequences, describing them as an adrenaline rush that incorporated skyscraper skimming stunts, first-person point-of-view shots, and effects that appeared to be substantially achieved through practical means rather than relying entirely on computer-generated imagery. That same review acknowledged the film arrived amid a mixed run for recent comic book releases, noting hits like Deadpool Wolverine, 2024, and Superman, 2025, alongside disappointments such as Thunderbolts, 2025, and Supergirl, 2026. And ultimately concluded that while Brand New Day mostly lived up to elevated expectations, it fell short of representing an unambiguous triumph for the genre. A review from Pajiba offered a similarly positive take, characterizing the Holland-led Spider-Man films as having consistently delivered a reliably enjoyable experience since Homecoming first launched the sub-franchise nearly a decade earlier, despite the challenge of following two earlier cinematic Spider-Man franchises within the same generation. The review noted some initial skepticism about whether Brand New Day would end up serving primarily as connective tissue for the larger build-up toward Avengers: Doomsday, but found that the film largely avoided that trap while it did introduce a significant Marvel Comics character in an unexpected context. That character's inclusion did not come bundled with heavy-handed setup for future MCU installments. The review credited series screenwriters Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, though it also wondered how much of the film's more restrained, character-first sensibility could be attributed to Cretton's direction, given his experience both writing and directing Shanghai and the Legend of the Ten Rings and creating the well-regarded Wonder Man series. Not every notable critic was fully won over. IndieWire's David Ehrlich praised Holland for delivering what he considered the actor's most nuanced and mature performance as Spider-Man to date, while nonetheless expressing a number of broader reservations about the film as a whole. USA Today's Brian Trout offered a more tempered assessment, acknowledging that the film was not the most energetic or thrilling entry in Holland's run but crediting it with attempting greater emotional depth than the average MCU installment. A review roundup piece published by Kotaku characterized overall critical reaction as split on whether Brand New Day represented meaningful evolution or simply more of the same, noting that some reviewers ranked it among the best Spider-Man films ever made while others remained considerably more skeptical of its achievements. That piece quoted one less impressed critic as arguing that while Holland brought a more winsome, sweetly naive energy to the role than either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield had in their own performances, that quality alone was not enough to fully elevate what they characterized as a film lacking major consequence within the larger franchise. Deadline's Pete Hammond, The Hollywood Reporter's David Rooney, and USA Today's Brian Trout were identified among the more enthusiastic voices praising Cretton's directorial choices for the film. More broadly, coverage of the film's critical reception frequently emphasized that reviewers were largely aligned in praising Holland's performance specifically, even in cases where they expressed reservations about the broader film. A pattern that several outlets noted was consistent with the film's exceptionally strong Rotten Tomatoes audience score, which outpaced the reception for any of the three prior Holland-led Spider-Man films despite critics rating it very slightly below No Way Home. Much of the critical conversation also centered on how the film handled its ensemble of villains and supporting street-level characters. Reviewers generally agreed that John Bernthal's Punisher provided some of the film's most memorable moments, with several noting that the character's uneasy, comedic-tinged rapport with Holland's Spider-Man, including the recurring gag involving his mouth being webbed shut whenever he attempted to swear, successfully threaded the needle between honoring the character's grim comic book roots and keeping the film accessible to a broader, PG-13 audience. Critics were similarly complimentary of Mark Ruffalo's return as Bruce Banner, with the character's regression into his volatile Savage Hulk persona drawing comparisons to his earlier, more menacing appearances in Avengers: Infinity War. Several reviewers felt that the film's decision to let Banner, Castle, and eventually Yelena exist within Parker's orbit without folding them into a larger MCU event added a welcome sense of groundedness that had sometimes been missing from franchise entries more explicitly tied to the studio's ongoing multiverse storylines. Discussion also gathered around the film's visual and tonal departures from its predecessors. Several critics noted that Brand New Day leaned into a moodier, more melancholic aesthetic than any previous Holland-led Spider-Man film, with slower-paced dramatic sequences intercut with bursts of kinetic, high-frame-rate action inspired by classic comic book covers. Some reviewers felt this shift paid off, arguing that it allowed the film to explore genuine themes of grief, isolation, and burnout in a way past entries in the trilogy had only gestured toward. Others were more ambivalent, suggesting that the film's attempt to balance quieter character work with large-scale spectacle occasionally resulted in an uneven pace, with certain subplots, particularly those involving Sadie Sink's still mysterious character and the film's central villain, feeling rushed or underexplained by the time the credits rolled. A handful of critics speculated that some of this unevenness may have been a byproduct of the additional photography completed just months before release, which was intended to sharpen the film's humor and rework a villain plotline but which some reviewers felt left visible seams in the finished cut. Even so, the consensus among most reviewers was that Holland's performance represented a genuine high point of his tenure as Spider-Man. Multiple critics highlighted his ability to carry the film's heavier emotional beats, particularly scenes dealing with Parker's loneliness and his fraught decision to erase himself from the lives of the people he loves, while still delivering the wit and physical comedy that have defined his take on the character since Homecoming. Several reviewers drew direct comparisons to Holland's dramatic work in The Odyssey, released just months earlier, suggesting that his experience on that project may have contributed to a more assured, controlled performance in Brand New Day. Critics who were more mixed on the film overall nonetheless tended to agree that Holland's performance alone made the film worth watching, with disagreements largely centering on whether the surrounding story, villain, and supporting subplots rose to meet him. The film's handling of its central mutation storyline and the gradual evolution of Parker's powers to include organic web shooters and periodic loss of control signified by his blackened eyes also drew considerable critical attention. Some reviewers praised the device as a clever, body horror-adjacent metaphor for adolescence and burnout, tying neatly into Holland's own description of the concept as a kind of spider puberty. Others felt the storyline was left somewhat unresolved by the film's end, arguing that its full implications seem clearly intended to be explored further in a subsequent installment rather than fully paid off within Brand New Day itself. This left several critics describing the film's ending as more of a turning point than a complete narrative arc, a criticism that echoed some of the reservations expressed about the film feeling transitional rather than a fully self-contained story. Taken together, the overall critical picture that emerged was of a film widely regarded as a clear artistic step forward for the Holland-led Spider-Man films, a grounded, character-driven, and anchored by widely praised lead performance, even as some reviewers felt it fell just short of matching the near-universal acclaim that had greeted No Way Home 5 years earlier. The gap between the film's exceptionally high audience score and its slightly more tempered, if still strongly positive, critical score was noted by multiple outlets as evidence that Brand New Day had succeeded overwhelmingly with the general movie-going public, even in instances where individual critics found room for reservations. 4 years have passed since Peter Parker made the biggest sacrifice of his life. The world has forgotten Peter Parker. His friends have forgotten him. The people who once knew him no longer remember his name. Even MJ, the person Peter loves more than anyone, has moved forward with her life without knowing that Peter was once a huge part of it. But Peter still remembers everything. He remembers Aunt May. He remembers MJ. He remembers Ned. He remembers all the people he lost and all the people he tried to protect. And now, instead of living as Peter Parker, he has almost completely become Spider-Man. This is where Spider-Man, Brand New Day begins. Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland, is living alone in New York City. He spends his days and nights protecting the city from criminals. He has no normal social life anymore, and he has no close friends to share his problems with. Peter is still trying to live with the consequences of Doctor Strange's spell. Before the events of this movie, Peter asked Doctor Strange to make everyone forget that Peter Parker existed. The spell saved the world from a dangerous magical problem, but it came with a terrible price. Everyone forgot Peter, but Peter did not forget them. Instead of giving up, he decides to dedicate his entire life to protecting New York. Over the next 4 years, Spider-Man becomes a full-time hero. He fights dangerous criminals and strange enemies, including Scorpion, Tombstone, Boomerang, Tarantula, and members of the Hand. Peter also works with Detective Jean DeWolf, who is one of the few people helping Spider-Man understand what is happening on the streets. But even though Peter is surrounded by people every night, he is still completely alone. From a distance, he sometimes watches MJ and Ned. MJ and Ned are now studying at MIT together. Peter could easily approach them. He could tell MJ everything. He could tell her that he still loves her. But he knows that changing her life again could create more pain. So Peter stays away. He watches the people he loves from a distance and continues being Spider-Man. Then one night, everything changes. Spider-Man suddenly notices a runway tank moving through Manhattan. He immediately starts chasing it, but another person is chasing the same tank. Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher, is also after it. Frank and Spider-Man are not exactly friends, and they do not agree on how criminals should be handled. Spider-Man manages to knock Frank out of his vehicle and continues chasing the tank. The tank eventually reaches the Department of Damage Control. Peter tries everything he can to stop it, but the tank crashes directly through the building. When Spider-Man opens the tank, he expects to find weapons or criminals. Instead, he finds an old woman. At first, Peter is confused. Then he notices something impossible. Someone is controlling the woman's mind. A mysterious person is able to move their consciousness from one body into another. The strange person jumps from the old woman's body into the body of a nearby guard. Peter realizes that this is not a normal criminal. This person has a powerful telepathic ability. Spider-Man follows the controlled guard toward the rooftop, but the mysterious telepath is already several steps ahead. The telepath controls another guard and makes him change the instructions for Scorpion. Instead of sending Scorpion to the raft, the guard orders that he be taken to Bellevue. Before disappearing, the telepath reveals one more surprise. There is a bomb inside the tank. Peter tries to stop it, but he is too late. The bomb explodes. Thankfully, the building has already been evacuated, so the explosion does not cause a massive loss of life. But Peter knows that this is only the beginning. Detective DeWolf later tells him that Scorpion has been released from Bellevue. Now Peter has a new question. Who is controlling these people, and what exactly are they looking for? Peter starts investigating. His search leads him to a Russian bathhouse, where he meets Yelena Belova. Yelena tells Peter that the Department of Damage Control has been attacked several times. Someone is searching for something called VMAX. Nobody seems to know exactly what VMAX is, but Peter knows that it must be important. He decides to investigate damage control himself. There he meets Bill Metzger, the head of the organization. Peter discovers something even stranger. The Hands ninjas are working with damage control. Metzger claims that he does not know who is behind the attacks. He also claims that he does not know what VMAX is, but Peter does not completely trust him. He notices that the attackers are interested in a huge vault inside the building. Whatever they are looking for appears to be hidden there. While Peter is investigating, his personal life becomes painful again. One day, Peter is talking to Detective DeWolf while standing in a shop. Then he sees Ned. Peter follows him. Ned goes to the apartment he shares with MJ, where they are having a party. Peter secretly watches from outside. He sees something that makes him smile. Ned still loves Spider-Man. In fact, Ned has created an entire wall filled with theories about Spider-Man's identity. He believes Spider-Man could be Flash Thompson. He even thinks Spider-Man might be their old teacher. Ned has also created an app called the Spidey Tracker. The app tries to follow Spider-Man's movements around the city. Peter watches all of this quietly. Then he sees MJ. Peter has flowers with him. The flowers were originally meant for Aunt May's grave, but Peter decides to give them to MJ. For a moment, he wants to approach her, but then he sees MJ kissing another man. Peter's heart breaks. He quietly leaves and swings back home. But when Peter reaches his apartment, something even more disturbing happens. His body suddenly begins changing. He feels intense pain. His senses become overwhelmed, and eventually, Peter passes out. When he wakes up, he discovers himself trapped inside a giant web cocoon. Peter manages to escape. Then he realizes something incredible. His body is producing organic webbing. His normal web cartridges are no longer working. Peter asks his eye assistant, Evie, to examine him. The results are shocking. His spider genes are developing. His DNA is changing. His body is evolving. But this new power comes with a serious problem. Peter's senses are becoming too powerful. Sounds, movement, smells, and danger signals are hitting him all at once. Peter has to learn how to control himself before his own powers destroy him. Eventually, Spider-Man goes after Scorpion again. Scorpion is attacking the Department of Damage Control. Peter fights him, but at first he is losing. Then Peter stops holding himself back. He allows his new spider abilities to take over. His strength becomes much greater. He grabs Scorpion and attacks him with incredible force. But Peter loses control. He slams Scorpion into a police car, seriously injuring the officer inside. Peter then tears Scorpion's tail away. But suddenly, Peter sees the truth. Scorpion was being controlled. The mysterious telepath was behind the attack. Peter is horrified. He realizes that his new powers are dangerous. If he cannot control them, he could hurt innocent people. Peter needs help, so he searches for someone who understands powerful physical transformations. He goes to a college campus and finds Bruce Banner. Bruce is teaching physics, although his students are far more interested in asking questions about the Avengers. After the class ends, Peter approaches Bruce. Bruce is wearing an inhibitor on his wrist. The device helps stop him from transforming into the Hulk. Peter asks Bruce for advice. He wants to create an inhibitor that can control his new spider abilities. He also wants to create another device that can stop the telepath. Bruce gives him the information he needs. Peter returns home and begins working, but the telepath is already watching him. She finds Peter and threatens him. Then she tells him something that changes everything. She is coming after MJ. Peter immediately swings through New York. He starts tracking people who have been mentally controlled. Eventually, he discovers an important weakness. The telepath cannot control people from unlimited distances. Her power has a range of about 33 feet. Peter begins using this information to fight back. When the telepath controls a helicopter pilot, Spider-Man webs the helicopter and stops it. But Peter knows the real target is MJ. He goes to MJ's apartment and convinces her to leave with him. They reach a rooftop. For a brief moment, Peter thinks his greatest dream may finally be coming true. MJ looks at him. She removes his mask. Then she kisses him. Peter believes she remembers. He believes the spell may finally be breaking. But it is not real. The telepath is controlling MJ. The telepath forces MJ toward the edge of the building. Peter catches her just before she falls. MJ becomes unconscious. Peter is terrified. The telepath then appears using another man's body. Peter surrenders because he does not want MJ to be hurt, but Peter catches a glimpse of the telepath's real body inside a car. For the first time, he sees her clearly. She is a teenage girl. Her name is Jean. Spider-Man takes MJ to Frank Castle's hideout. Frank's place is filled with traps. Peter has to protect MJ while dealing with Frank's dangerous setup. After arguing, Frank agrees to let MJ stay there. Peter scans Jean's face. Most of her information has been erased, but Peter finds a name, Jean Elaine Gray. Peter begins building an inhibitor for Jean. Meanwhile, Peter and Frank argue again. Peter tells Frank that he never had anyone to care about, but Peter does not understand Frank's history. He does not know how much Frank has already lost, and this difference between them becomes important later. Jean attacks Damage Control again. Spider-Man goes there immediately. MJ convinces Frank to help him. Inside the building, Metzger takes his people into a safe room. Something is trying to break into the vault. Then Peter arrives, and he discovers the biggest problem yet. Jean has taken control of Bruce Banner. She removes Bruce's inhibitor. Bruce becomes the Hulk. Frank arrives and tries to stop him. Eventually, Peter and Frank manage to free Bruce from Jean's control. But Bruce is not okay. Something inside him has broken. He transforms again. This time, he becomes an even larger and more dangerous version of the Hulk. Peter desperately tries to stop him. The battle causes massive destruction. Peter even has to stop huge pieces of debris from falling onto innocent people. Eventually, Peter reminds Bruce that they are friends. Those words help Bruce regain control. But Jean has already found another person to control, Frank Castle. Jean enters Frank's mind and uses his own explosives to destroy the vault. Spider-Man reaches the vault before Jean can kill Metzger. Peter uses his inhibitor and manages to remove Jean from Frank's mind. Metzger shoots Jean with a tranquilizer. As Jean begins losing consciousness, she whispers one name, Sarah. Bruce is taken to a hospital. Jean is placed in Damage Control custody. Peter asks Metzger about Sarah. Metzger says that Jean entered his mind and saw a memory of a former co-worker named Sarah who had recently died. But Peter is not convinced. He returns to Frank's hideout. There, he discovers that MJ has found his letter. Peter finally has to tell her the truth. He explains that he is Peter Parker. He explains their history. He tells MJ that he loves her, but MJ cannot return those feelings. She has no memories of their relationship. Peter is devastated, but he understands. He takes MJ home. Before leaving, MJ tells Peter to meet Ned. Ned is excited because he finally gets to meet his hero. Then MJ says something that makes Peter suspicious. She tells him she does not remember being controlled by Jean when she kissed Spider-Man. Peter immediately realizes that something is wrong. Maybe Metzger lied. Maybe Jean never entered MJ's mind. Peter contacts Yelena again. Yelena discovers that Damage Control erased much of Jean's information, but she finds something important. Sarah was Jean's sister. Peter suddenly understands. Jean is not simply a dangerous villain. She is a person who lost someone she loved. Then the movie reveals Jean's past. Jean and Sarah were sisters. Their mother abandoned them after their mutant powers appeared. Sarah taught Jean how to move her mind from one person to another. But then Damage Control agents arrived. They wanted Sarah. The team was led by Metzger. Jean tried to save her sister, but Sarah stopped her. Jean watched as Sarah was taken away. Now Jean finally discovers what happened to her. Sarah died during experiments, and the mysterious VMAX was connected to those experiments. Jean's anger becomes uncontrollable. At Damage Control, Metzger straps Jean into a chair and activates a machine designed to measure her telepathic range. Jean realizes the truth. Sarah had seen something inside the building. She had discovered the experiments. Jean removes her inhibitor. Her power suddenly expands across the city. A massive psychic wave spreads through New York. People everywhere become frozen. MJ and Ned are among them. Frank is just outside Jean's range. He prepares a sniper rifle. He believes killing Jean may be the only way to stop her. But Peter has another plan. Spider-Man reaches damage control. The Hands ninjas attack him, but they are all being controlled by Jean. Peter struggles against them. Then he makes a decision. He removes his inhibitor. He accepts his new powers. Peter finally understands that he does not have to choose between his two identities. He can be Peter Parker, and he can be Spider-Man. He defeats the ninjas and the guards and reaches Jean. Jean is ready to attack Metzger. She controls pieces of broken glass and points them toward him. Frank is preparing to fire his sniper rifle. Peter decides to enter Jean's mind. Instead of fighting her, Peter allows Jean to see his memories. She sees Aunt May. She sees the love between Peter and May. Then Peter lets Jean take his place in the memory. For a moment, Jean feels as if May is speaking directly to her. Peter helps Jean understand something. She is not the only person who has lost someone. Peter has also experienced loss. He understands her pain. Jean finally begins to let go of her anger, but Frank fires. Peter sees the shot. He moves Jean out of the way. The bullet hits Peter. Peter falls. Jean uses her powers to keep him alive. Frank immediately rushes Peter to the hospital. New York waits to find out whether Spider-Man will survive. Eventually, Peter wakes up. Frank is beside him. Frank feels guilty. He admits that his actions caused Peter to get hurt. But then he says something Peter never expected. He considers Peter a friend. Frank helps Peter escape. He puts on Spider-Man's mask and gloves and stands near the window. Outside, a huge crowd is waiting. The people of New York want to know if their hero is alive. Peter watches. He realizes that even though the world forgot Peter Parker, they did not forget Spider-Man. MJ is also at home. She is still wearing the black dahlia necklace Peter gave her. She looks at the necklace, and she smiles. Jean eventually leaves New York on a bus. Peter talks to Detective DeWolf. She tells him that Metzger is missing and the police are investigating damage control. She also tells Peter that she is happy he is not as alone as he once was. But she gives him one important piece of advice. He needs to rest. Peter then sees Ned. He approaches him. They perform their old secret handshake. Something strange happens. For a brief moment, Ned seems to remember Peter. Maybe the memories are coming back. Maybe Peter has finally found a way back into the lives of the people he loves. Then the credits begin. But the story is not completely finished. After the credits, Ned's Spidey tracker suddenly loses Spider-Man's signal. The app shows that Spider-Man is no longer being detected on Earth. Then the signal returns, but it is coming from somewhere far away, outer space, and the final message appears: Spider-Man will return. Now let's talk about the numbers behind this movie. Spider-Man: Brand New Day was not a small production. The reported production budget is around $225 million. That means Sony and Marvel had to spend an enormous amount of money before the movie could even begin making a profit. The budget covers things such as actors, crew, sets, costumes, visual effects, action sequences, locations, post-production, and many other production expenses. And Spider-Man movies are especially expensive because the character spends a huge amount of time swinging through New York, fighting villains, jumping between buildings, and taking part in large-scale action scenes. But the investment appears to have paid off. The movie opened with an enormous worldwide result. Sony reported that the film made around $932 million globally during its opening weekend. It also set a massive domestic opening record, with around $360 million in the United States and Canada. And the movie did not stop there. By August 2026, reports showed that Spider-Man: Brand New Day had crossed the $2 billion mark worldwide. That puts the movie among the biggest box office successes in cinema history. It also means that the film has earned many times its reported production budget at the worldwide box office. However, one important thing needs to be understood. A movie's box office total is not the same as the studio's profit. When a movie earns money in theaters, that money is divided between theaters and distributors. The studio also has marketing and distribution expenses that are separate from the production budget. So saying that the movie made more than $2 billion does not mean Sony received the entire $2 billion as profit. Still, crossing $2 billion is a huge achievement. It shows how powerful the Spider-Man name remains around the world, and the movie's success is especially interesting because the story is much more personal than a simple superhero adventure. Peter is not fighting only villains, he is fighting loneliness, he is fighting guilt. He is fighting his own changing body, and he is fighting the pain of watching the people he loves move forward without him. That is what makes Brand New Day different. Peter finally begins to understand that being Spider-Man does not mean he has to completely destroy Peter Parker. He can be both. He can protect the city and still have a personal life. He can remember the people he lost without allowing that pain to control him. And perhaps most importantly, he can finally understand that being a hero does not mean carrying every problem alone. That is the real meaning behind Spider-Man, Brand New Day. Peter Parker's world may have forgotten him, but Peter has not forgotten the world, and as long as he continues to put on the mask, protect innocent people, and stand up when everyone else is afraid, Spider-Man will always have a place in New York City. The final signal coming from outer space suggests that Peter's next adventure could be much bigger. The city may be safe for now. Jean is gone. Metzger is missing. Ned may be starting to remember. MJ may still have feelings buried somewhere inside her forgotten memories. And Spider-Man is finally beginning to understand his new powers. But the signal from space proves one thing. Peter Parker's story is far from over. Spider-Man will return.